This week on A Lively Experiment, lawmakers got their chance to try and find out what led to the closure of the Washington Bridge. And a Rhode Island PBS series focuses on the increasing risks of giving birth. One of our panelists talks about the problem and some possible solutions.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by...
Hi, I'm John Hazen White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.
Joining us on the panel, Weayonnoh Nelson-Davies, Executive Director of the Economic Progress Institute, Boston Globe reporter Amanda Milkovits, and Dr. Pablo Rodriguez, retired professor at Brown University's Warren Alpert School of Medicine. Welcome to Lively. I'm Jim Hummel. It is great to have you with us this week. Rhode Island's DOT director was on the hot seat for hours Monday as more than 24 lawmakers sat as a joint House-Senate oversight committee. The exchanges at times became contentious as Peter Alviti Jr. tried to remind legislators of the body of work the DOT has had since he took the helm 8 years ago, while trying to explain how such a catastrophic failure of oversight could lead to the closure of the westbound lanes in December. You know, Amanda, we've been reporting here a long time, and I was trying to think of a story. There's probably only been a handful that have dominated the news cycle week after week. Usually we do something and we move on. This one looks like it's going to go on for a while.
Well, because we're all living it. It's not over for us. And I think if anything came out of that hearing, it's the lack of answers of when is this going to be repaired? Is it going to have to be rebuilt? And my question is, why didn't Director Alviti know about it? Why wasn't he informed in real time and on that Friday? So he could have been much more prepared, and the governor could have been prepared. I mean, I was thinking about what other stories compares to this. Do you remember the December debacle when we had the giant snowstorm and children were stuck on school buses, and that dominated, and you know the state EMA director lost his job and the Providence EMA director lost his job. I mean, this is the other December debacle, except we're all still on the school bus.
Yeah. Pablo?
Listen, this is a place where there are no innocent mistakes. And what I mean is that we've known for a long time that many of Rhode Island bridges are deficient. So we sometimes tend to blame the person now, but a lot of people are responsible for not doing what we're supposed to be doing with all these bridges for a long, long time. So, but that said, crisis management, by the governor and by Alviti has been just absolutely atrocious. When I'll give you an example of what happens when a doctor has a mistake. The first thing we're supposed to do is acknowledge the mistake, and if it's our fault, immediately apologize to the patient. And in this case, what we had was defensiveness. What we had was, oh, it's not that bad. What we had is that we did a great job closing the bridge on time. You cannot pat yourself in the back when something as disastrous as this happens, and if from the beginning, there would have been an acknowledgement, this is our fault, this should never have happened, and we're going to work hard to make sure that never happens again, and we're going to fix this situation right now. But that didn't happen until weeks later, when instead of, congratulating themselves, they're very saying it's our fault.
Yeah, congratulating themselves because the bridge didn't collapse.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I'm very proud of the General Assembly for sending a message that they're taking this seriously with this hearing. But from the hearing, it was frustrating because we still don't know what happened. We still don't know what's going to happen, whether we're going to repair this bridge or we're going to rebuild it, whether it's going to take the 3 months they initially said it would take, or whether it's going to take 1 to 2 years. So there's a lot of frustration here. I also think out of this hearing came the sentiment that the public does not trust that we know what we're doing with this, right? This is not a mere inconvenience. This is impacting people's lives. They cannot get to work on time, school on time, childcare, and they cannot predict how the traffic will be. So this is serious, and we don't know, again, what's going to happen with other breaches. The public is losing trust in whether we are handling this well. We're hearing reports about, outside contractors. Is that a mismanagement? Should we have more internal people working on this so we can catch these issues sooner than we did in
Who's
this
inspecting the inspectors?
Correct.
Right. And, you know, my colleague Brian Amaral has been documenting, he's been speaking with the union leaders about really dysfunction and a toxic environment inside the DOT. How much of that has contributed to this problem where people don't, inside the DOT, do not trust each other, do not trust leadership, are not informing management?
Yeah, and the thing that I've been thinking about, we've talked about this every week, probably since December, and the closures. It's not just the people. I live in the East Bay, so it affects me, and all of you are on the West Side, but it's affecting you in different ways. I mean, Amanda, every week, don't feel badly, every week we've had a panelist late, and it's not the people on the East Side. It's because of the residual backup.
Yeah, and one thing that really worries me is the fact that surveillance and safety, which is something that should be ongoing all the time, we're coming to accept reports that are cookie cutter, that have the same language, you know, that is, oh, we picked up the same language because nothing changed. That's not how safety is supposed to work.
Right.
You know, you're supposed to say what's happening in the moment.
Exactly.
And you cannot convince anyone. You don't need to be an engineer to know that, come on, you know, a bridge cannot be collapsing,
Right.
you know, and 6 months before it was perfectly fine.
Correct.
Yeah.
People don't trust the system, and with good reason.
And now we really want to know, okay, what other bridges are at stake?
Exactly.
Right. And I even want to look further, you know, because we're talking about a bridge, but I'm looking at the big picture of transportation, right? So we have issues with biking and walking and public transportation. That's another big issue that we're not talking about that does impact all of this. You know, right now, the governor proposed a budget that is giving RIPTA $10 million instead of the $80 million they need. And they're saying they're going to cut services. So that's also going to impact how people are getting around the state.
Yeah, I also wonder that you make a good point about RIPTA, and that's just a Band-Aid. They're taking some of the federal ARPA money,
Exactly.
and so where are we going to be next year? They're having to cut routes. They can't get drivers, and if you're going to have a society that's functioning and your economy is humming, you got to have a good transportation system.
You do, and RIPTA is saying the ARPA money is temporary. We need to invest general revenue within the RIPTA system, and so that's something we're ignoring again, and that's a systemic issue. You know, we ignore the bridge issue. Now we're ignoring public transportation when people on the ground are crying and say we're in a crisis. We need to think now more seriously about how we generate revenue in the state to address issues like public transportation or childcare and education. And so I see all of these issues very intertwined.
I also wonder where the feds are in all this. We know that the highway administrator, Federal Highway, came here, but they want to know where their money has gone. And it's been a lot of money invested in that bridge over the years.
And there is an investigation going on, and the investigators are not going to be tolerating cookie cutter approaches to safety because it's federal money being invested. So some heads are going to fall. There's no doubt about it.
So if the public isn't getting those answers, the feds certainly will.
Yeah, they have a subpoena power. Like, don't you ever wish you had subpoena
Oh, God,
power?
wouldn't that be fun?
It would make our lives a lot easier instead of away, you little pesky.
You don't have to pay for the public.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Lost in all of this has been, there's a General Assembly session going on, and there's a lot of legislation making its way through. First of all, welcome, Weayonnoh. This is your first time with us. You were the executive director of the Economic Progress Institute, so you were looking at a lot of legislation. One thing that you wanted to highlight was temporary caregivers insurance, and it seems like this year there's a lot. So explain what that is and what the legislation does. And it seems like there's momentum this year.
Yes, we're very optimistic that this could be the year where we expand Rhode Island Pay Leave Program, which is a temporary caregiver insurance program, TCI, most people know it as. So what this program does is providing workers an opportunity to take time to care for loved ones. In Rhode Island right now, in 2024, we can take workers, all of us, can take 6 weeks off to take care of a spouse or a child or a parent. What this bill is doing, there are three big things this bill is doing. It's expanding the weeks from 6 to 12 weeks. So like workers could take that off to spend time with their loved ones. And then it's also expanding the definition of family as we have immigrants come in, the LGBTQ community, and we have foster children, for example, who may not have immediate family. What this bill would do is expand that definition so workers can take care of grandchildren, siblings, and other people who are in their primary care. And then the last thing it will do is to expand the dependent allowance from $10 per dependent to $20 per dependent. And pay leave is important for so many reasons. The 12 weeks in and of itself is important because doctors have told us that that is a good enough time to bond with a new baby, right? So that's important. It's also important when we talk about infant health outcomes, right? It leads to positive health outcomes. Postpartum, it also leads to recovery time to have that 12-week. So this is a bill that will impact the lives of workers and impact the lives of family. We're optimistic. The Senate leadership have made this a priority. They have endorsed it. And so we're hoping this is the year we get it done in Rhode Island.
Seems pretty basic.
It is pretty basic in the fact that other countries have had incredible leave policies up to a year in some countries, and they haven't gone broke or they haven't, sunk into the ocean. And other states, now Connecticut and Massachusetts have much better leave policies than we have. And we're always talking about, we want to improve education like Massachusetts and do like Massachusetts. Well, this is a good opportunity to be like Massachusetts and increase family leave. When you mentioned maternal death, and we're going to be talking about it in a little while, but most maternal deaths occur postpartum. People don't realize that. People think it's during pregnancy. 53% of them occur, between 7 days postpartum and up to a year. So leave is extremely important specifically for pregnant women, but for the entire family. Those children that are cared for their parents in the first 3 months of life it's determinant in the health of that child. So this is
even
really
that 12
important.
weeks goes by so quickly.
Oh, very quickly.
does,
from having our kids.
It really feels like it will be a game changer for Rhode Island workers. It'll really make the state competitive. I mean, it's very impressive that also expanding the definition of family and who will be eligible for it. I mean, can you find anybody who has not been impacted by leave? I can't. I can think of a number of people who really could have used that extra time. So if you're a worker, it's going to be a tremendous change in your life. It will impact your family for sure. And it sounds like it will be really beneficial for the state.
Your company already goes above and beyond.
Above and
I
beyond.
know
And
we've
boy,
had a
it's
few
nice.
of you, a few of your colleagues who have had children, and all of a sudden, wow, they're gone for a long time.
It's a Massachusetts company.
Yeah, exactly. And we used to be the leader in the country. We're one of the first states to pass pay leave. We're the third state in the nation to pass it. But then we have one of the worst policies for states that have pay leave at 6 weeks, and 60% of wages people receive. So this will be a game changer for us to catch up with the rest of the states that follow our lead.
One other thing that may be on your priority list, you put out a sheet a couple of weeks ago for your legislative priorities. What else would you like to see go through?
We have a lot, but the other thing that
try to contain yourself.
I'll try, Jim, to give me a platform to talk about this. Payday lender reform. It's another one. For 13 years in the state of Rhode Island, we have been fighting to reform the payday lending practice. And every time I talk about this, people ask, it hasn't passed yet? What is it? Payday lender in the state of Rhode Island have a carve out in law because they're considered check cashers, so they're not considered lender. But what that carve out and special treatment does is allow them to charge triple-digit interest rates. So they can charge low income and communities of color who they target up to 260%, where other small lenders can only charge 36% in the state of Rhode Island. For 13 years, we've been going to the State House to say we have to protect low-income communities, and this is predatory lending. They are preying on these communities to rely on these lenders that are not a service, but really keeping people in the cycle of debt.
And it almost got through last year.
did.
You know what you do? Just a little tip from a guy who's been around for a while. You need to hire a former speaker. And then maybe it'll go through on your side. This is what it almost went through last year, but people say 260% interest, and you're like,
I'm like, the loan sharking is legal. Who knew?
Yeah, it is.
Exactly.
I just don't understand who has the power to affect this legislature for so long. Because I remember Juan Pichardo, the Senator Juan Pichardo put the initial, years ago, and we thought this is a no-brainer, and yet we're still here this year again.
Why isn't it going through?
Well, that's a question we want to answer, right? We will say last year we got a historic win, like the first time it went to the House floor and we got 70-2. So we know legislators won this. Now we're hoping, because we got that move, that the Senate will also move this year. We'll get hearings earlier, because everyone's asking why not, right? It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So we don't have a former Speaker of the House, but we do have people who are saying we won this. I will.
All right. Advice. All right, we will get back to legislative stuff a little bit later. Last month, Rhode Island PBS ran a 3-part series called The Risk of Giving Birth. It chronicles the steady increase over the past 20 years of pregnancy complications and deaths in the United States, a rate that is dramatically higher than other wealthy nations around the world. Even more striking, black women who are pregnant have a rate of death that is 3 times that of white women. Here's a short recap of the series.
In 2023, the maternal health crisis is not getting better. In fact, it is getting worse.
People giving birth in the U.S. are increasingly more likely to die now than they were decades ago.
Why do so many of us have these issues?
We cannot continue in this path. So we are going in the wrong direction. Instead of getting better, we are getting worse.
According to the Centers for Disease Control, the maternal mortality rate for Latinas jumped by 54% from 2020 to 2021.
If we can get women to be health literate, we can save the world.
Women's health, we're about to expand from 2 days to 3 days now.
If we better the circumstances that surround the lives of people that are at risk, we can reduce the number.
You can watch the entire series on the Rhode Island PBS YouTube channel by going to youtube.com/Rhode Island PBS. Pablo, you're wearing a number of hats today. Not only you're a lively panelist, but you were featured in this series. We should also give our regular disclaimer that you are a member of the Rhode Island PBS board. Talk about overall, you were featured in the 3rd series about Latina health, but just the larger picture for those who don't know about, it just seems the United States, which is always considered to have such a great health system, this is a real chink in the armor, isn't it?
10 times the rate of developed countries like Japan, Spain, and Germany. 10 times the rate. And the interesting part about it is that people keep talking about poverty and social determinants of health as the cause for these mortalities and morbidities. And yes, they do contribute, but when you separate those issues, when you have women of color that have power, that have money, like Serena Williams, like the Olympic runner who died from childbirth. These are women that had power, had insurance. The only thing that they had against it is that they were black. And their complications are 80% preventable. 80% of maternal death complications in the country are preventable. So we have to understand that there is a systemic problem in our healthcare system that affects people of color differentially. And it's not just insurance, it's not just poverty, it's racism.
Yeah, and this series resonated with me for so many reasons, right? Well, I'm a mother of 2. I'm also an attorney. You know, prior to coming to EPI, I was a legal aid attorney, and I work with doctors. So I work in medical legal partnership, actually working with doctors and medical students on the social determinants of health, on healthcare equity, understanding the issues of the healthcare system. And then I got pregnant, and actually the story, especially episode 2, it almost felt like it was my story. So talking about I wasn't living in poverty, I was educated, a professional, an attorney, and an advocate for people who go through this, and yet and still I almost lost my child because I wasn't listened to. So when people talk about the black women in that series not being listened to, that hit me hard, because for a month before I had an emergency C-section, I told my doctors my baby wasn't moving and no one would pay attention to me, and then realized that she was starving because she was no longer connected to me. So I almost lost her, and she had to spend time in the NICU. So that was something that was preventable. It had nothing to do with poverty, and I felt guilty. Like, I will advocate for someone else. Why couldn't I advocate for myself? So this series really showed that it is a systemic issue, and the more stories we hear, hopefully that will lead us to get into good solutions for women and children.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, this, and watching all three parts, it felt like this was must-see TV for the healthcare industry. Everybody is in healthcare, starting with the receptionists, the staff, the nurses, the doctors, to understand systemic racism and how that could be affecting how they are hearing what women have to say about their pregnancies, how they are preparing to prevent any issues, preparing to prevent any postpartum depression. It was, I mean, everything that Pablo just said, the statistics just blew me away. When you see it all put together, 80% of these deaths are preventable? Right. How is that even possible? And it was just astounding to me. What I thought was also interesting was how some of the legislation that's been passed, for example, for doulas, has the potential to really make a difference in this. So Rhode Island could be a leader on this.
And that was Marcia Ranglin-Fassel, the representative, who had her own problem with her twins almost 3 decades ago. So what about the doula legislation? Good?
I wish I had a doula.
Yeah.
You know, I really, when I saw that, I was like, it was 5 years
I missed
later.
out on the doula,
I missed out on it. That would have
right.
been amazing. So I think doula, midwives, and then like Pablo's like really training people to understand where biases are coming from, that will help. And legislators to get involved. So doula was a good example of our lawmakers actually getting involved to help to solve this problem.
How frustrating was that not to be heard?
It was hurtful. It almost led to death. You know, it was frustrating, but it was almost like disastrous that I could have lost my child and maybe my life just by not being listened to. So even that, just changing that dynamics could make a difference.
And just surrounding that issue, 23% of maternal deaths are caused from mental health issues, postpartum depression, and it's the single most important cause of death of mothers. And those kinds of experiences, she felt guilty. She felt guilty, even though it had nothing to do with her. Right. That just magnifying through a whole population. She is very knowledgeable. She's educated. Imagine someone that doesn't have that kind of knowledge and experiencing what you have experienced. That's what leads to the maternal deaths, you know, as a result of depression.
You talked in the third part about things going on in Central Falls, particularly with Latina women, and it's encouraging that they're addressing, of course, the mayor Rivera, a Latina woman herself. Talk a little bit about that briefly, about what's going on in Central Falls.
Yes. So in Rhode Island, per se, maternal death rates are difficult to measure because there's so many, we're so small. But morbidity, we have much higher morbidity for people of color, for women of color in Rhode Island. And in Central Falls, the situation was as a result of COVID. With COVID, you had all these numbers of people developing complications. And for each maternal death, there are 80 complications that happen. And in Rhode Island, we have twice the national average of complications in pregnancy.
Okay. Again, I commend you to watch that series. All available right now, the 3 parts. They're 30 minutes each, and they're excellent. They're just beautifully produced. Let's do this. Let's go to outrageous and/or kudos, and there's one other thing I want to ask Amanda about. What do you have, outrage or kudo this week?
Oh, actually, I have a kudos.
Go ahead.
Which is shocking. My kudos is a shout out to my unsung hero, who is Kathy in the records department of the North Providence Police Department.
There you go.
Without whom I could not have obtained more than several hundred pages of records of all the police calls to St. Mary's Home for Children, which is several hundred of those calls were of children running away. And St. Mary's Home for Children is under a great deal of scrutiny because of the Child Advocates investigation that found abuse, neglect, general chaos, and dysfunction. And this was one example of what was going on. And behind every investigation is someone like a Kathy who is making sure that those public records are produced. So I was
going to talk about that as our last topic, but let's talk about that now. You did an amazing series, and the public records. We talked about this off air. It's so fundamental in the bridge in the Philly fiasco last year, and government increasingly wants to seem to put up that barrier. So there should be more Cathys out there, right?
There should be more Cathys out there in the state departments and in police departments everywhere. I told her what I was looking for, and she says, I'm going to make sure I get everything for you. And she says, you didn't even know about this address, did you? Let me get this. Let me get this. Let me turn it around in a couple of days. Thank God. Because, but the problem with the St. Mary's Home for Children is that this has been, like the bridge, a problem that's been allowed to fester for years. I'm talking to families of kids who are there, who have been there, who are there now, who said none of what was in the Child Advocate's report was any surprise. The neighbors said it was no surprise. The police department said it was no surprise. But it took a long time to expose it.
Crazy. Pablo, what do you have?
My outrage is Republicans in Congress rejecting a compromise bipartisan bill on immigration before they even read it. Because
be careful what you ask for, because you might get it, right?
It's amazing, and only because Donald Trump said, you cannot approve it because I don't want Biden to have, an election year, win. I mean, it's absolutely atrocious, and it shows that they are not honest in Congress.
The unfortunate thing was, and I've talked about this before, it's really too bad that the Biden administration didn't embrace this a year ago. We're so close. And if for nothing else, to take the issue away from your opponent. And I think Biden's had a real blind spot on this. I mean, we see now he's got his Democratic colleagues in the cities in New York and Chicago and all of the influx of migrants. So, the border states are kind of sticking it to him that Biden didn't act sooner, because he really could have taken the wind out of the Republican sails.
This has been going on for 20 years. We had a compromise 20 years ago, and he was killed again because of politics. The border is the way it is because we have chosen to make it that way. It's like the bridges. If you don't fix the bridges, they're going to come down. The same thing with the border. If you don't fix the problem by investing in judges, in guards, by making sure that the asylum system works, you're going to have this problem forever, regardless of who is president.
Great. Weayonnoh, welcome once again. We hope to have you back, if you'll have us, if you'll come back. You have an outrage or a kudo this week?
I have an outrage, but first I will say kudos to the Kansas City Chiefs for winning the Super Bowl. But my outrage is related, right? And so we had violence at the celebration parade where one person was killed and a lot of people injured. And so outrage about gun violence in this country and making sure we do something about it, and hate crime. Right here in North Providence, we had a gospel temple that was arson, happened there. And so that's an outrage in thinking about how we're addressing violence in this country.
Yeah, and you think a lot of thoughts and prayers don't go so far anymore.
It does not. We need policy. We need action.
Yeah. We have just about 45 seconds left. What's going to happen with the St. Mary's situation?
Well, they have a new interim CEO who so far is really impressing people who meet him, who is pledging transparency and showing it. It remains to be seen how it's going to be turned around, but now all eyes are on it, so there's some hope.
Is that addition going through? It seems they want to expand, or do you think that there's going to be pushback on that?
It's supposed to go through, but now the groundbreaking's been put off. They're saying it's because of soil remediation, but I think that's going to be...
it might be a little something else?
Well, the Senate oversight... the Senate Finance Committee is going to be looking at that next month.
We're selling oranges at a loss. We're going to get a bigger truck? No.
Great. Folks, that is all the time we have. We appreciate you watching. Pablo and Amanda and Weayonnoh, welcome. We do hope you come back. If you don't catch us Friday at 7 or Sunday at noon, we're all over social media. All of our shows are archived at ripbs.org/lively. Facebook, Twitter, if you want to call it X, that's okay too. And wherever you get your favorite podcast, take us along in the car or on a run or wherever you're going if you can't watch us. We hope you have a great week. Come back here next week as a lively experiment continues.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by...
Hi, I'm John Hazen-White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.